Our campus must be dry. IU.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's podcast, Dry Campus Podcast. Alongside us today is your usual host, me, Ethan Doman, and my co-host, Sai Balabatra Petruni. And today, we will be discussing IU basketball. This is our first podcast, so we'll be discussing IU basketball. Of course, we're not going to stop. We're not going to stop talking about IU football as they're coming off a tough but hard-fought loss against one of the best teams in the nation, Ohio State. So that will you will see that podcast pop up later on this week. But with Indiana basketball really snuck up upon us, it's all of a sudden here. I think getting caught up in the hype of IU football, forgot to realize that IU basketball potentially starts this week on Wednesday as we take on Tennessee Tech. And so yeah, as we discuss IU basketball, what are your initial thoughts on this team as a whole? This is Archie's fourth season, and this is finally a team that where he has almost all of his players. I believe Al Durham is the only player that Archie did not recruit. He was a Tom Crean recruit. So what are your thoughts going into the season as we get going into the COVID season of college basketball?
Well, that's the interesting thing, right, Ethan? You're absolutely right. Basketball really snuck up on us. I know we were really watching football closely as Indiana has kind of just risen up the ranks of football. Really surprisingly, but we're a basketball school first and foremost, and that's what we're known for. So it's exciting to have the basketball season start creeping up on us. And I think a big part of that is because of COVID. We weren't really sure, how things were going to play out. The season was delayed a couple weeks. The Big Ten didn't release their schedule until very recently. So a lot of things were up in the air. We didn't know what was going on, but we have basketball. It's back. We're going to play Tennessee Tech on Wednesday, barring COVID-related issues. Tennessee Tech's coach has had a positive case, so he has the coronavirus. So he won't be traveling to Bloomington, making the trip. So players are still getting tested. So we don't know what's going to happen. A lot of it's up in the air. But you see, that's the big question, Ethan. Basketball is a lot different than football in terms of football you play once a week. And if you have COVID issues, a lot of times maybe you can figure them out during the week. Sit some players, figure out who they've been in contact with, and maybe still be able to play a game. Basketball, you can't really do that. You have COVID cases, you're probably going to have to cancel that game you have upcoming, because you have multiple games every week. So it's going to be interesting to see how things play out. We don't really have a benchmark for how things will work in basketball. You can look to the NBA, but they had a bubble, and college basketball is not doing that. So I do think at least early on, COVID's going to be a big issue. Thankfully, there are non-conference games in this first month or so that aren't essential that might take the hit. But I'll be really interested to see how the NCAA manages this and how the Big Ten manages this, because we don't want a football situation where some teams have played less games than others and things like that when we're trying to decide who deserves to go to the tournament.
Yeah, and I did see the Big Ten put in some weekends where they can schedule some games that will be canceled. And I believe there are three. I think it's either 3 or 4 2-day windows in which if a Big Ten, now this is Big Ten, so this if our game against Tennessee Tech is canceled, I believe that's just canceled and that's it. But if we have a Big Ten game, if IU's playing, for example, Northwestern, and that game gets canceled or postponed, I guess because of COVID, that game can be played on another day. And so the Big Ten was smart in that aspect because we've seen in football already. We've seen, I mean, in any sport, this season will struggle. And I think what makes basketball more difficult than football is, and you stated this previously, football is played once a week, where basketball is, I would say, on average, played twice a week. And so you're naturally coming into contact with more people, um, because you're playing essentially twice the amount of games, twice the amount of opponents. Um, and so the Big Ten and the NCAA have their hands full. However, it does look like the NCAA has chosen a site for March Madness, a site that we all know well, and that's Indianapolis. And that's really cool. Indianapolis is a city that has hosted many Final Fours in the past. They know how to host. Um, they know how to host large sporting events. They have so in the past. So that's going to be really cool down the line in March if we can get there. Having Indianapolis at the epicenter of college basketball. That's going to be really neat to see. Um, but let's say this season goes as smooth as possible. Um, you know, I guess what are your initial expectations of this team? This is a team that would have most likely made the tournament last year. Was kind of around that anywhere from 8 to 11 seed. It would have been around there. And then of course our last game against Nebraska was the last game of the Big Ten. Um, a team that usually plays solid defense and has very hit and miss offense. So yeah, what are your expectations going into the season?
Well, I think the biggest expectation uh, for this team, and especially for Archie Miller now in his fourth season, is you have to make the tournament. I mean, that's that's a definite. You absolutely have to make the tournament, and it would be nice if you made the tournament without it being a question up in the air once you finish the regular season. Um, you know, I, we last season, we thought we were going to make the tournament, but we were still kind of in that position where we would need to have a little bit of a good showing in the Big Ten tournament in order to make the tournament. I'd like to be better than that, and it's going to be tough. The Big Ten is really good this year. There are 7 teams in the top 25, 3 teams in the top 10. Iowa at number 5, Wisconsin at number 7, and Illinois at number 8. So we have our work cut out for us. But that's where I see the difference. Archie Miller has all of his own recruits now, except for Al Durham, who, Al Durham's good. So Al Durham is a solid player that, he's the type of guy you want on your team. But at the end of the day, we just have to play a better brand of basketball. We kind of got a little lucky last year to even be in the conversation to make the tournament because we were downright sloppy at times. And we had so many moments where we had these 4 to 8 minute stretches where we couldn't even score. And we were turning the ball over. Our passing was sloppy. Everything was sloppy. And at the end of the day, that sort of stuff comes down to coaching. And, I've seen it in the past couple years. We have had younger teams with Finney, Durham. They were younger guys. But now they're the veterans of this team. Rob Finney and Al Durham are the veterans, and now you got Christian Lander coming in as a guard as well, who's young but extremely talented, and probably he's the best recruit we've had since Romeo Langford. So that's another thing to look at. You have the veteran guard presence, and then now you have a young, very talented guard. That's what I'm really looking for, is that guard play to be improved this year, because our we have size down under. We got Trace Jackson Davis. We got Race Thompson. Those guys can play. And those guys can play good defense. Trace is an incredible offensive weapon as well. So it's really that guard play I'm looking for to improve, where we really had a lot of turnovers. We weren't moving the ball well. And I want to see I just want to see improvement in terms of the product we're putting out on the court.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think our guard play is what set us back last year. Trace was only a freshman last year, and quite frankly, was usually the best player for us on the floor. Just dominance on offense. His footwork is fantastic. His strength, being able to out rebound, senior Big Ten centers. I expect him to possibly be in the conversation for Big Ten Player of the Year this year. But in terms of our guard play, it definitely suffered last year. Finney was always in and out. I believe he was hurt for a little bit of last year. Um, and I think another thing too was the leadership aspect of this guard group was lacking. I was Me personally, I was always more of a pro Devonte Green player than others. However, you know, I don't think he brought the leadership skills that this team needed. Um, and it's going to be very important for, and like you had just mentioned, players like Finney and especially Al Durham being a senior this year, getting the guards together and not tolerating any turnovers and not tolerating those long sustained scoreless runs, because at the end of the day, those scoreless runs are going to be more on the guard play than the big man play, because it's up to the guard to get the ball down low, right? And so if there's movement up top, the guards are passing and screening and creating movement. That's going to help a lot. And I do love that nearly all of our recruits, of course, you had previously mentioned Christian Lander, 6'2" guard. I think he's going to be great. He's going to be a great point guard for us right out the gate. We have Anthony Leal, 6'5" guard. Trey Galloway, 6'4" guard. Jordan Geronimo, he's a 6'6" kind of forward guard hybrid. So Archie recruited shorter this cycle. We didn't have a recruit over 6'6" this for this recruiting class, and I think he realized our guard play has to be better. And he definitely answered the bell in terms of recruiting guys who are shooters, who are ball handlers, who can control the ball, control the game. That's going to be very important for this team going forward, because I think Trace is going to be great. I think Race Thompson is going to have a great year as well. And then, of course, we have Jerome Hunter, and he always kind of sneaks up on you, but he's a sneaky athletic player. And so I think, moving forward, guard play, making sure you don't turn the ball over is going to be vital for this team, because as long as we don't turn the ball over and we at least get a shot on every possession, this team is going to have a chance to win a lot of their games, because I know we're going to have solid defense. And defense has always been, in the Archie era, the defense has quite frankly always been better than the offense.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I know you mentioned Devonte Green, and I also was a Devonte Green supporter. But at the end of the day, when you have a guy like Devonte, if you want the good, you're gonna have to take the bad as well, and there's a lot of it. But look, I completely agree. Guard play has to improve, and that's the key. But I also, I see it as an issue where, Archie Miller has this fundamental style of basketball that he likes to coach, and defense is paramount, and I love that. But when it comes to the offense, sometimes there's this lack of, being able to just put the ball in your best player's hands. He's trying to move the ball and he's trying to play team basketball, which I love. But, when you have those droughts where you're not getting the ball in the hoop and guys are missing shots, that's when you want to just give it inside to Trace Jackson Davis and just give him a chance to make a play. I mean, that's the sort of thing we did with Juwan Morgan all the time. When we didn't really have talent on the team, a couple years ago, there were games where, I just saw them feed it into Juwan almost every time, and he just goes strong to the basket and gets us too. So, I really want us to be able to understand how good Trace Jackson Davis is. He's the best player on the team. He's going to be one of the best players in the Big Ten. He could really, I don't think he'll be Big Ten Player of the Year. Luka Garza is ridiculous. But, just give him a chance to be one of the best players in the country. I think he has the opportunity to be one of the best big men in the country, and I firmly believe that. So we just have to give them a chance.
Yeah, yeah. And it's always where this team has always thrived is getting the ball in the trace and then seeing what happens. Whether that's trace, backing down a guy and getting a nice jump hook, or making the opponent defenders collapse in so that we can get a guy open from three. Speaking of 3-pointers, that's always been an issue in the Archie era, having guys just hit 3-pointers. I believe it was the Rutgers game last year where we just could not hit anything, and we were open. It was Al Durham, Finney, you name it, any guard, Franklin just had open threes and we couldn't hit them. And that does come down to coaching. That comes down to making sure you in practice you start to practice the 3-pointers. You start to practice your foot position on them, where your elbow is and how you release, so it becomes instinctive in the games and they don't even think about it. And you could tell sometimes during those games when a guard or even somebody like Jerome Hunter, who can also shoot threes, would get open, they would think about it too much. They would think, oh, what am I doing right? You don't have to think about it if you practice. During the practice, if you nail that down. And again, that's why we recruited Christian Lander, who can shoot threes, Anthony Leal, who can shoot threes. Al Durham has gotten progressively better at threes. Hopefully, Armand Franklin can also make a jump. That's going to be an extreme key for this team. If we can start to hit threes, and we don't have to be the best in the Big Ten at it, but if we can be reasonable, and if we have to make a defense come to us at the 3-point line, then that will draw the defense out towards the 3-point line. That's when you're able to really feed it into Trace, feed it into Brunk and Race. Then you have the defense guessing. And whenever the defense is guessing and you're a step ahead, then you're always going to be ahead of the game and you're going to win a lot of games. And so that's going to be a key for this team, playing that inside-outside game, because we know what Trace is going to do down low. It's just a matter if we can start to hit those threes and those long twos, keep the defense guessing. I think another thing, too, to think about for this season is no fans in the Big Ten. We said previously on our previous football podcast that was going to be great for us, because I don't know if we go into Ohio State and only lose by 7, there's 100,000 fans there screaming. It's kind of the opposite for basketball. We thrive off of the environment. We beat, I think it was 4 or 5 top 25 teams in Assembly Hall last year. And we played good those games. We really killed Iowa, and we beat Florida State handily. We beat Penn State handily. But a lot of that had to do with the crowd, because the crowd is always there. And we were at all of those games. It gets loud. It gets intense in there. So these players are going to have to learn how to play without a crowd. Archie's going to have to learn how to coach without a crowd there. And there's pros and cons. Now we don't have to go to Michigan State with a crowd. We don't have to go to Purdue with a crowd. But that's something just to keep in mind as the season progresses, especially into the Big Ten play.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Not having fans is going to be a little bit of a detriment to us. It's going to hurt us. And, in past seasons where, we've barely missed the tournament, we've been right on the cusp. I honestly feel like if we didn't have the fan base as we do, and Assembly Hall wasn't the electric environment as it was, we're a bad basketball team in the Big Ten. Like past few years, especially the first couple years of Archie's tenure, we're not good. And, I really do think it's going to hurt us this year. And with the competition level of the Big Ten, I say the expectation is making the tournament, and I believe we're going to make the tournament, but I honestly don't think we're really going to be able to compete in the Big Ten this year. That's just, as a fan, I always, would love for us to win everything, obviously, but, realistically looking at it, I just don't have the level of optimism that I even had at the start of the season for football, for this basketball team. And I think the goal here is improvement. We have Trace Jackson Davis, and now we got all these young recruits that Archie's brought in. These guard recruits, Christian Lander. I know you mentioned Leal. I'm really interested to see what kind of pick and roll we can get with Christian Lander and Trace. That could be fun to watch. So I'm really looking for how these young guys will play within the Archie system, and I'm just looking for improvement in terms of product on the court. But in terms of what my expectations are, I think making the tournament is a must for Archie, but it's going to be tough this year. This conference is really difficult, and I just don't think that this team has it yet.
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit of an unrealistic expectation. If your expectation is to have Indiana win the Big Ten, that's a little bit unrealistic. Just looking, Iowa is extremely good. They're getting nearly everybody back. Have obviously Luka Garza, who is nearly everybody's Big Ten Player of the Year or pre-Big Ten Player of the Year. Some people have him as the National Player of the Year. Also got a couple other players, Jordan Bohannon, Patrick McCaffrey. Basically returning everybody. They're going to be great. Illinois, they're I think Illinois will win the Big Ten. Having Cockburn and I forget the name of their other guy, IU.
Ayusale or something. It's some like crazy name.
Yeah, but he has had a fantastic Ayu Dasunumu, I believe is his name. He had a dagger against us last year that lost us the game. They're going to be extremely good. They're a very well-rounded team as well. However, I also do think that this Indiana team should finish in the top half of the Big Ten. Because we're better than a lot of Big Ten teams. We're better than Nebraska. We're better than Minnesota. We're better than Purdue. We're better than Northwestern. We're better than a lot of these teams. Where I think it is unrealistic to say we should win the Big Ten, I don't think it's unrealistic to say we can finish in the top 5. I think we can be 5th or 4th in this Big Ten. Now, things may have to go our way. We will have to be better than a team like a Michigan, or Rutgers, kind of around that 25, 24 range. However, this is the best team that Archie has put together. I believe this is the most talented team that Archie has put together. And a lot of it is, I believe, going to come down to these new recruits that we've brought in. Phinnessy is always going to be at the point guard spot, and he's going to be great. Of course, we have Trace. We have people like Race returning, Brunk returning, though Brunk, he's always up and down in my eyes. But if the guys like Galloway and Leal can really make an impact and make some threes and play some solid defense, and also I've heard this Jordan Geronimo kid, they're comparing him to like an OG, where he comes in not extremely highly recruited, but just a freak athlete. And he's just extremely athletic. Yeah, he's raw, but he's just extremely athletic. And at the end of the day, athleticism is very important, especially in college. If you're just more athletic than a guy, and then when you pair that with good coaching, you can really blossom a guy. And so this team's ceiling is higher than any other team's ceiling that Archie has had. I think this is a potential Sweet 16 team. However, are we going to get there? A lot of things kind of have to go our way there. Trace is going to have to live up to the hype. Our guards need to start to make threes, and our defense, I don't think our defense necessarily needs to get better. It just needs to the natural progression of the defense getting better needs to happen. We can't have any setbacks on the defensive end. But what gives me hope is we essentially lost nobody last year. We did lose Green, so I guess you're going to lose that spark that he would sometimes bring, especially in those games in Assembly Hall. And we did lose Deron Davis. My opinion, good guy, not much of a loss in terms of playing the court. But I see this team. I see this team making the tournament, being the best team in the Archie era. I just don't know how good this team is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't have huge expectations. I completely agree. It comes down to the new recruits. I think it's so important how those guys play. We are losing Green, who can provide that spark, but that helps a lot when you have a crowd. When you can just get a guy who can reel off a few buckets when you're not playing well. Just as a team, have like an individual guy who can just make something happen out of nothing. But yeah, it's going to come down to those new recruits. And, hopefully they prove me wrong, man. I really hope they prove me wrong. And, on the other side of it, we had a lot of close games last year, and we've been one of those teams the past couple of years who, plays pretty much everyone in the Big Ten tough. But, down the stretch, we just can't find it within ourselves to win those tight games. I mean, that's why Big Ten basketball is so fun, because it feels like every game is close. But those weren't going in our favor a lot of the times. And so, for me, expectation, a goal for me would just be to win a few more of those games that, come down to the wire and kind of build that championship DNA, or that fight where, when the going gets tough, we know how to win. And that's really important in college basketball, especially when we get to the tournament. I don't know if we'll get far in the tournament. I think Sweet 16 is a little ambitious for me. I think if we win a game in the tournament, that's a solid year for us, with solid improvement. But overall, obviously very excited for this basketball season, Ethan. And we got some non-conference games coming up to kind of, appetizer, like a little appetizer for us. With Tennessee Tech coming up on Wednesday as a little softball to kind of get us going, and then the Maui Invitational, where our first game is against a pretty solid Providence team. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, Providence. In the AP poll, where the votes come in, they were just a few votes behind us. Projected around third in the Big East, and the Big East is always a solid conference. But we also know Texas is in the Maui Invitational, and they're ranked this year, I believe, around the 18 mark. Or they're 19th. And then North Carolina is not your father's North Carolina. They're 16th, so they're solid. They're not, at the top 10 UNC team that we kind of expect every year from them. But I believe Maui will be a great test. Even though we do say Maui, it's actually in Asheville, North Carolina. I do feel bad for the players, having this chance to go to Maui, and of course you get to go to North Carolina. But at the end of the day, it will be a great test for us. Coming out, I think coming out with 2 wins within that 3-day period will be a success. Obviously, you want to win every game, and if we can figure out a way to do that, that would be great. Most likely if we were to do that, we'd probably face Texas in the second round and then North Carolina in the championship. But I believe coming out with 2 wins, coming out 2-1 will be solid for this team, especially where the schedule really doesn't get easier. Playing Florida State again in the Big Ten ACC Challenge. I've never seen an instance where you've played the same team twice in a row. But they're ranked as well. They're 21st. Then we got, of course, the Crossroads Classic, where those games always come down to the wire. Indiana has had 3 straight hard-stopping games that we've managed to win every single one, but every single time it have a heart attack. And then you start Big Ten play. So there's really, I believe there's 2 games, Tennessee Tech and North Alabama, that are the cupcake easy games. And every other game is a tough litmus test for this team. And so I am excited for Maui. I hope I'm not disappointed if and when, we come out 2-1, or I will be disappointed if we only win one game in that 3-day span. But if we come out with 2 wins, with that one loss, kind of being a hard fought loss where we kind of lost the game in the last few minutes, I would rather lose one of those games than a game in the Big Ten where standings matter in the Big Ten, because then you're playing for seeding in the Big Ten tournament at that point. So I'm not expecting perfection, obviously, but understanding, what this team is good at, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, that's found out in these Maui Invitational tournaments, in a game against Florida State, against Butler. Then once you get into the Big Ten, you start to find your identity and you start to ride with that.
Well, I think these games are actually really important to, just get us going, and provide us with a challenge to start off the season. So we're faced with, some level of adversity and some level of tough competition before we head into Big Ten play, and prepare us for those Big Ten games. I think that's really important because I remember you and I were talking about this, last year, how, last year our non-conference games were kind of a walk in the park, really easy games that Archie scheduled for us, with the primary motive of being, all right, let's just rack up 6 or 7 wins. And that'll really help us at the end of the season when, you have those win totals, and say, all right, this team has 20 wins. They deserve to be in the tournament. Even though 6 or 7 of those are non-conference easy opponents. And so that really brings up the question, what kind of competition do you want in those non-conference games? On one hand, last season, we get a bunch of wins, but it didn't really feel like we were well prepared for Big Ten competition after those games. And, it showed. It showed on the court. We weren't able to win a lot of those games early on. We were kind of killed in a lot of those games early on. So, and it took us a while to really, get things going and understand our strengths and weaknesses like you talked about, and, figuring out what to do on the court as a team. This year, things are a little bit different, and we have tougher competition heading into the Big Ten, and we might not have the same number of wins. It might be 3 or 4 wins as opposed to 6 or 7, and things are going to be a lot tougher heading into the Big Ten competition. But I feel like this will prepare us more for those tougher games when the games mean more in January and February. So I'm really looking forward to seeing some of these non-conference games, where we really get our feet wet and really try to build this basketball team, and understand what we're good at and what our identity is, like you said earlier.
Yeah. I'm just overall excited. Like you said earlier, I was always focused so much on the football aspect of IU in this historic season that we're having, that this season just snuck up upon us, and I forgot. Oh, this is IU basketball. This is why we're a basketball school. And so I'm excited. This is definitely the highest expectations I've had for a team in a while. I've had, as a fan growing up, I've had higher expectations, obviously, in the years of having Cody Zeller and Victor Oladipo. Those were national championship aspirations. But I think this is also a very important season for Archie, for Coach Miller you finally have your team for the most part. You have come up short in the past. You've had some good wins in the past. Let's see what you can do now. Let's see if you can make this team not necessarily a legitimate threat to win the Big Ten and beyond, but to not be an easy out for any team, no matter who you're playing, to give that team a fight. That's what IU football has proven that they can do, and let's see if IU basketball can do it as well.
Yeah, I think this is a really important season for Archie Miller, and that's really the biggest story heading into the season is the pressure's on. we were talking about, is Archie on the hot seat for, a couple seasons now, even though he's kind of just starting out. But if we don't make this tournament this year, Archie is for real on the hot seat. It's really important that he delivers results this year. And I know we're not talking about championship level results yet, but we want to see improvement, and we want to see specific improvement. It has to be tangible. So I think that's the most important thing. And I know you and I are really excited. I'm obviously going to be watching the game on Wednesday. Hopefully it takes place. And I think that should be a little softball against Tennessee Tech. It'll just be good to see the guys back out there, but I don't think we're really going to have an issue winning that game.
What's your score prediction for that game if it happens?
Are we going to do this? Score prediction against Tennessee Tech. I'm going to go 76-52.
I'll go 82-61. I think they may be able to score 60. Hopefully not.
That's a high scoring basketball game.
82. Right, yeah, that's a high scoring IU basketball game right there.
Yeah. But overall, I think we're both very excited, and the game is on Wednesday at 8 p.m. on the Big Ten Network. So we'll be back next week, to talk about the results. We'll talk about the Maui Invitational. We'll likely have the podcast after the Maui Invitational kind of digest everything that's taken place, and we will have a football podcast later on this week, recapping the Ohio State game that just happened, as well as the Maryland game that is about to happen this weekend. So
it actually will happen. Maryland is practicing, and they are good. So I'm excited that game's actually going to happen.
Yeah, it always seems like every team's COVID issues happen to fall not align happen to not align with Indiana's schedule. So that's very lucky, and hopefully that'll give us an opportunity to beat a team with a winning record and kind of get back on track. So we'll talk about all of that on the football podcast later this week. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're ramping up. We're gonna be doing like 2 podcasts a week pretty regularly moving forward. So we're really excited about that, and we want to thank all of you for tuning in to another episode of Dry Campus. Please follow our Instagram and our Twitter. Our Instagram is @DryCampusPod. Our Twitter is @PodDry. We will be live tweeting basketball games as well, baby. Let's go. We are entering dangerous territory. And once again, Ethan and Cy, we are signing off for Dry Campus, and we'll see you again.
Our